If you're old enough to find your own way home, you're old enough to stop being our problem. My father said it without looking at me. I was 12, standing beside a closed gas station 23 miles from our house, holding a backpack that contained one sandwich, a library book, and the small blue sweater my mother had knitted for me. My parents' car disappeared around the bend, and I waited for the engine to come back. It never did. What they didn't know was that the road they left me on would become the road that changed all our lives. I remember the sound more than anything else, tires fading into the distance while the wind pushed dry leaves across the pavement. I kept telling myself they would turn around. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Then darkness began settling over the fields, and the gas station lights flickered on. I was too proud to cry, because my father had just told me to grow up. So I sat on the curb, hugged my backpack, and studied the road home. I knew the direction, but 12 miles after the station, the road split into 3. I had no phone, no money, and no idea which turn was safe. Before we begin, if you enjoy emotional and inspiring stories like this, make sure to support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of kindness, hope, and humanity. My name is Daniel Reed, and for years I told myself that night was the end of my childhood. In truth, it was the beginning of something my parents never expected. Earlier that afternoon, we had been driving back from my grandmother's funeral. The car had been silent for nearly an hour. My mother stared through the window. My father gripped the steering wheel. I finally asked whether Grandma had left anything for me. Dad snapped that I was being selfish. I apologized. Then, after another mile, he pulled over. "Get out," he said. I thought he was joking. "What? You wanted to be grown. You keep asking questions like an adult. So grow up. Find your own way home." Mom finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't stop him. That hurt more than his words. I opened the door slowly. "Mom." She turned away. The door shut. Their car rolled forward. I stood there until I could no longer see the red taillights. At the gas station, an elderly mechanic named Mr. Alvarez noticed me. He came outside carrying a flashlight and a thermos. "Kid, where are your people?" They went ahead. He studied my face. "Did they say they were coming back?" I shook my head. He did not ask another question. He unlocked the station office, gave me hot chocolate, and called the police. While we waited, he noticed the blue sweater in my backpack. "Your mother make that?" "Yes." "You still love her?" I stared into the cup. "I don't know." He nodded slowly. "You don't have to decide tonight." A patrol car arrived. An officer named Marachan crouched beside me and asked for my address. When I gave it, her expression changed. She knew my parents. Not personally, but from the neighborhood. She called them. My father answered and said I had been acting difficult and had chosen to walk home. Officer Chin asked whether they had actually left me there. There was a long silence. Then Dad said, "He needs consequences." Officer Chin looked at me. "He needs his parents." My father hung up. That was the first time an adult said aloud what I had been afraid to admit. The police drove me home. The porch light was off. Nobody opened the door. Officer Chin knocked twice, then took me to a temporary family shelter. I spent that night awake beneath a thin blanket, listening to strangers breathe. The next morning, my Aunt Claire arrived from 2 states away. She hugged me so tightly my backpack slipped from my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I asked, "For what?" "For not knowing." That sentence stayed with me. My parents were investigated, and eventually they were required to attend counseling and parenting classes. But I refused to live with them. Aunt Claire became my guardian. She never demanded that I forgive anyone. She simply gave me a bedroom, a desk, and rules that felt strangely comforting. "Dinner is at 7, she said my first night. "What if I'm late?" "Then I'll worry. And I'll come find you." I looked at her. She smiled. That's what family does. Years passed. I learned to repair engines from Mr. Alvarez on weekends. I discovered I liked fixing things because machines never pretended they were fine when something inside was broken. At 16, I rebuilt an old motorcycle. At 18, I earned a scholarship to a technical college. At 23, I opened a small repair shop called Blue Road Motors, named after the sweater I had carried that night. I never spoke to my parents. Then, 12 years after they left me, my phone rang at 2:17 in the morning. A hospital administrator said my father had collapsed at work. He was alive, but critically ill. My mother had been trying to reach me. I almost hung up. Then the administrator said, "Your father keeps asking for you." I sat on the edge of my bed until sunrise. At the hospital, my mother looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was gray. Her hands trembled around a paper cup. "You came," she whispered. I almost didn't. I know. My father lay beneath white sheets, awake but exhausted. When he saw me, his eyes filled. "Daniel." I stood near the doorway. "I was wrong," he said. 3 words. 12 years late. I wanted to tell him they were not enough. Instead I asked, "Why did you leave me?" He looked at my mother. She lowered her head. "We were grieving your grandmother," he said. "We were angry, frightened, and drowning in debts. None of that excuses what we did." "No," I said. "It doesn't. I thought being hard on you would make you strong. It made me believe I was unwanted." My father closed his eyes. A tear moved toward his temple. I know. For the first time, I saw not the father who had abandoned me, but a broken man who finally understood the damage he had caused. That did not erase the road, the darkness, or the 12-year-old boy waiting beside the gas station. But it changed what I carried inside me. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this the night we left you," she said. "I never had the courage to give it to you." I unfolded it. The note said, "I love you. I am ashamed that love was not strong enough to make me stop him." I read it twice. Then I looked at her. "You should have stopped him." I know. There was no argument. No excuse. Just truth. I visited my father twice more during his recovery. We spoke carefully, like people crossing a bridge they had burned years ago. He asked about my shop. I told him about Mr. Alvarez, Aunt Claire, and the motorcycle. He laughed softly when I explained the name. "Blue Road," he said. "Because of the sweater?" "Because I survived the road." He looked away. My father recovered enough to leave the hospital, but he never became the man I wished he had been. For a long time, I thought Aunt Claire had saved me that morning by simply taking me in. Later, I understood that she saved me every ordinary day after that. She never made grand speeches. She packed lunches when I forgot, waited outside school when buses were late, and left the hallway light on whenever I worked past midnight. Once, during my first year of college, I called her after failing an exam. I expected disappointment. Instead she said, "Did you learn anything?" "Yes." "Then the money wasn't wasted." I laughed for the first time that week. Mr. Alvarez taught me another lesson. One winter afternoon, I asked why he had helped a stranger when he could have simply locked the station and gone home. He tightened a bolt on a truck and said, "Because somebody helped me once." "Who?" "My brother. Long time ago." "What happened to him?" "He died." I stopped working. Mr. Alvarez looked at me. "Kindness is strange, Daniel. The person who gives it may disappear, but the kindness keeps traveling." I carried those words into adulthood. When my father's letter arrived, I almost tore it apart. Instead, I called Aunt Claire. "Do you think I should forgive him?" She was quiet for several seconds. "That is not my decision." "What would you do?" "I would ask whether forgiveness makes your life lighter. And if it doesn't, then take your time." That was the freedom she had given me. She never told me what I owed anyone. Months later, my father came to Blue Road Motors without warning. He stood outside the office window, holding a cardboard box. I almost pretended not to see him. I opened the door. He handed me the box. Inside was my library book, its cover bent and its pages repaired with tape. "I found it in our garage," he said. "You had it in your backpack that night." I touched the cover. "I thought I lost it." "I know." He looked at the shop around him. "You built something good." I answered, "People helped me build it." He nodded. I wish I had been one of them. For once, I did not know what to say. So I stepped aside and let him enter. A year later, I received a letter from my father. Inside was a photograph of the old gas station. The building had been demolished. Only the cracked curb remained. On the back he had written, "I drove past this place every year. I never stopped because I was afraid you would still be sitting there." I took the photograph to my shop and placed it beside my childhood blue sweater. That evening, a frightened boy entered the garage with his mother. Their car had broken down. The boy stood quietly while his mother explained that they had been traveling all afternoon and were exhausted. I recognized the look in his eyes. I knelt beside him. "You okay?" He nodded. "Scared?" A shrug. I smiled. "Then stay right here. We'll get your car running, and nobody is leaving you alone." His mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. As I repaired the car, I realized something I had spent years learning: people can fail us terribly, but their failure does not decide who we become. The night my parents told me to find my own way home, they believed they were teaching me to stand alone. They were wrong. I survived because strangers, relatives, and eventually even imperfect people taught me something better. Growing up was never about finding the road alone. It was about learning which people would walk it beside you. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to find your own way through a painful moment, and who helped you along the road? Sometimes sharing our stories reminds someone else that they are not alone. And if this story meant something to you, please like the video and subscribe for more stories about kindness, hope, courage, compassion, and humanity. Because sometimes the person who feels abandoned today becomes the person who makes sure nobody else is left behind tomorrow.